Hello and welcome to another week of Education 503. This week's topic deals with building digital interactive learning templates. Check out my Minecraft background, really represents the whole idea of building. But really the focus this week is on these digital interactive learning templates. So the goal of this week's session is to give you an idea of what we're talking about when we're talking about digital learning templates, some examples of templates you can use with students, as well as getting started with building your own. And so let's get started. So the whole idea about digital learning templates really comes from another educational topic which you may have heard about, instructional scaffolding. You may have heard in your studies about Vygotsky and the zone of proximal development. Bruner's also written about this, and so on. And really what we're talking about is helping the learner do something that they wouldn't necessarily be able to do completely on their own. So that scaffold, and in this case the template, will somehow help the learner do something that he or she wouldn't otherwise be able to do. So let's take a look at some examples of what we're talking about. Here's an example of a comic strip that was built with Google Slides. So in this case, the student's job was to retell a science concept. And so a template was given with maybe a few backgrounds, and the student got to choose certain aspects of it that he or she could put in, such as different characters, a different topic. In this case, this student's job is describing the term osmosis. So they do so through a funny cartoon. Anyways, there are other types of templates which, instead of being kind of a creative end product like this to retell a big concept or even a small idea in their own kind of creative way, in other cases, the template can be used to help organize ideas. In this case, it's math manipulatives. A really great way. In this particular one, it's counters, so you can just at a very young age, they can start to build numbers. You can even add that into, combine it with addition, subtraction, other aspects of that number sense. These virtual manipulatives work very well. And in other cases, this is now a Google Drawings. Here's a template that was created, fairly simple. It was created by our good friends in Black Gold. And it's basically, they've got a picture as a background and some little text boxes over here which the student uses to organize his or her thinking. They can also add in, here's an example of a wetland, and so they can add in, use the features like inserting images that they find from the web to sort of add, and then add in text. In some cases they can add in links to websites, and they can just basically expand upon their knowledge. So in a way it's like a digital worksheet, but a little bit better. Here's another example of a thought organizer. In this case, this graphic organizer talks about character traits. So while the student may have random thoughts and memories and ideas about particular characters, this forces the learner to really focus on that. So asks the character or the student to fill in a particular character trait and explain the rationale as to why. A couple of traits there. So it's just a way of organizing those thoughts. So in summary, the different templates that we see, and I've got a couple of good links here that I'll share with you. One to the team in Edmonton Catholic. We've got a Google support site with some classroom resources where we have templates in various formats, as well as an awesome site by Black Gold Regional District. But what you'll see is, as you start to look at these templates, they fall into different categories. Some are just sort of like the graphic organizer, or even using the math manipulatives, kind of falls in the same boat. Just a way of organizing the thinking. In some cases with words, other cases with math manipulatives, and you put a little frame in place to help the student organize that thinking. In other cases, it can be more of a creative problem-solving tool. You could see, the example of the comic. We see examples of magazine covers and bookmarks and all sorts of pretend book covers, etc. So there are other ways that the student can very creatively elaborate on the thinking. And when it comes to the use of our Google tools here, there are a lot of advantages for using these tools. So let's start with Google Drawings, drawings.google.com. So you may recall playing around with this a little bit, in particularly with our Google Docs. It has a feature to insert drawing, but there is a standalone Google Drawings tool. This is great because when I come back to the wetlands one, this is the one that's been filled in. The beauty in Google Drawings is its simplicity. There's not a whole lot going on here. You've got your kind of your main stage area, and you've got an area, and I'll just go to the blank one now. You've got an area to the left and to the right where you can add in extra information, instructions if need be, and then the user can add in text boxes, images to whatever you've already got there. So it's very easy. I've just right-clicked on the background. You can change that background to a custom color. You can insert images like they've done in this particular one here. They've even given an example, so you can kind of see some visual. It's almost like visual instructions. Might be nice for younger students. They don't need text to read to be able to understand that. So the beauty of Google Drawings is its simplicity to be able to create some sort of structure in place, whether it's a graphic organizer or a creative end product that you want the student to build, and then they can use their own creativity and some of the other features to insert diagrams, charts, images, text box, and so on. A lot of different things they can add into that to sort of expand on that thinking. And that's certainly a great tool to get started with. Now, Google Slides is another really good tool, and in some ways it has some advantages over Google Drawings. In other ways, disadvantages. So let me just add a new slide here. So some of the advantages of Google Slides is that you can add a lot more different content. For example, I can insert video. So it can be video that I've recorded. You may recall seeing the links in previous weeks to Alice Keeler Webcam Record, that particular extension, or Screencastify, or it could be a YouTube video on a particular topic. So we can add now layers of multimedia in here, perhaps as part of the instructions, perhaps as part of the template itself. And you can, as I have done here, you can very easily change a background not only to be a color, but you can even search the web like I have done here. So very quickly you can now add in a whole bunch of really interesting stuff. You've had a bit of experience now also inserting shapes, which, as you saw in the math example here, can be done very quickly. You may recall that little trick. If you add in multiple of the same shape, Control D or Command D on a Mac will kind of copy and paste those repetitive items. So it's easy for the teacher to create something that is a really good starter for a student to then continue on with in some way. So I come back now to our week 2 on student-centered learning, and as you develop activities for students, templates for them to use and expand upon their learning, put it through a bit of an evaluative process as you go. And one of the ways you can evaluate your particular activity is it student-centered? So, for example, and it doesn't always align depending on the activity you're doing, but in your template, is there some element of choice? For example, you may recall in the wetlands ecosystem, the student could add in their own animals. They had to do some thinking and perhaps some recall, perhaps some research. to then add in some elements. In the graphic organizers, they would have to do some decide which character traits in that particular graphic organizer. They'd have to decide some of their words. So allowing for some element of choice is certainly one of those things. Now, another important feature of these templates is the assistive technologies that can be used to support student learning more independently. And let's go back to PowerPoint. Well, Google Slides. Google Slides has a lot of built-in assistive technologies. For example, you may recall from our Google Docs the voice typing tool. Well, in Google Slides, there is also a voice typing for the speaker notes. So if the student has to bring in some text either onto their slide or even below as far as notes goes, they can turn on that voice typing, and here is my information that I am talking about. So it's either in here, and now they can also very easily copy and paste into their slides. So there are some assistive technologies built into some of these tools as well. Google Slides does work with the read and write toolbar, so providing writing suggestions as they type, as well as dictionary, picture dictionary, text to speech if there are some words that have been put in as instructions. They can use the text to speech features. And so there are some built-in technologies, assistive technologies as well. And even in a tool like Google Drawings, where there is no voice typing, and read and write toolbar does not work with it, even by virtue of the fact that they can insert images, it's just another way of communicating that might not be text-based if that is their area of challenge. And certainly by visually organizing a page like this, you could definitely call that an assistive technology in a lot of ways. And the fact that they can type digitally, very easily edit their work digitally, spell check in many cases provides these assistive technologies. Now we also want to really focus on thinking. We can make all sorts of digital worksheets, if you will, that really involve very low levels of thinking. So ask yourself, does this particular activity help develop any of these cross-curricular competencies of communication or problem solving, critical thinking or creativity, collaboration, and to what degree do your scaffolded templates offer that? And they won't always offer all of them, and that's just fine, but some of the time they should at least cover some of those particular competencies. From a digital citizenship standpoint, as you work with digital media, certainly talking about not communicating too much private information about themselves when there's something they're creating, if it's going to be shared with others outside the classroom. Also things like copyright-free images. Those are just general topics that can be covered as students are creating this, making and remixing if they are using work that was from another person, perhaps a web source, learning how to show whose work that was and cite their sources. Depending on the age level, they can do that in different ways. And certainly templates are a wonderful opportunity for giving students the opportunity to demonstrate what they know using a range of tools. So it fits very, very well with that. And so those are just a few things to think about when developing your templates. So one, is it student-centered? And the second thing that I would invite you to think about, and this is from both a practical standpoint and a learning standpoint, is when you are creating these particular templates, I mean, it all sounds well and good. You can make these beautiful, gorgeous things. But number one, if you're putting in so much time and work to create something, and then when the students do the activity, it's not taking them that much time to finish it. For example, I could create a whole Google drawing about a particular book I read, and I could list off all the different events that happen in that book and make a beautiful background with characters and so on, and have little text, lines of text about the different story events, and the students might have to drag them in order from first to last. Well, that might take them 5 minutes to do, and maybe it takes me 2 hours to make this template. Is it really worth it? So beyond that, it's all about who is doing the most thinking, and you really, as much as possible, to whatever age appropriate degree possible, you want the students to be doing more thinking than you. So what if, instead of you creating the full template of the story events, what if you just created maybe a background to represent that story, perhaps had a couple of characters on the page? Maybe the student has to first brainstorm and list. Maybe you do it as a class, maybe you do it as a small group or as individuals, retelling what the main aspects of the story were, and then maybe the student mixes those up and almost makes a game for another fellow classmate to create. So students can be involved in the creation of these templates too, to use with their classmates as a really good thinking activity. So that's just another thing to consider as you make these templates. I've got a lot of great websites that have some ready-made templates, and I mean, we are teachers, and what teachers do is we find a lot of great ideas out there and we kind of make them our own. So you can start, I mean, by all means, if you want to create your own, that's wonderful. But if you want to find ready-made ones out there and then modify them, there's nothing wrong with that. Or even just use those ones that you find out there. This is from our emerging tech site in Edmonton Catholic. This is the black gold shared Google resources. So many templates. You can then even go into filter by grade, and they even, within these grades, they've embedded a bunch of Google Drive folders, so you can then even drill down into particular subject levels and really get into that. So there are a lot of ready-made things out there. You don't need to necessarily start right from scratch all the time. As a beginning teacher, you're just physically not going to have the time to do that. And again, measure how much time it's taking you versus how much time it's taking the students to work on it. If your 2 hours of work results in a 2-week project for the kids, game on. It sounds like there's a lot of great thinking the students are going to do. Here's another great website. Eric Kurtz is a great guy. If you're a Twitter user and you want to follow some great educational technology people, I've mentioned Alice Keeler's name numerous times. Eric Kurtz is another one. So he writes a blog called Control Alt Achieve. So here are a couple of his templates for Google Slides, as well as here's another one for Google Drawings. These are great tools to use. And so that's it. That's the kind of the overall ideas around creating interactive learning templates. I'll do a couple of quick tutorial pieces there, and then at the bottom of this page you'll see your participation task for this week.